Hello listeners, from Roy Demarev Sam, back from his travels to Izhevsk in Russia, and observing a scene which is not too joyful this morning across the board. In particular, I have to express a lot of sympathy for people who've been victims of either accidents or terrorism. I assume it's an accident that this towering inferno happened in West London. And a lot of people must have died in it. We don't know how many yet. It will take a long time to find out. I, in a way, hope at least it is an accident and not tourism. We don't need not terrorism, because that would really open a can of worms. In the USA also, random shootings at a Republican rally are just awful. I might not agree with Republicans any more than the killer did, but there's no reason to open gunfire. It's just awful. The inferno in London kind of epitomizes all the bad things that are happening in the United Kingdom at present. The political uncertainty is extremely great. As I speak, the Conservatives have still not come to an agreement with the Northern Irish Party. I expect they will, and just out of sheer fear, the Tory MPs who probably would like to get rid of Theresa May dare not just at the moment, although a couple of people like George Osborne have spoken up and referred to her with the quite striking term of being a dead woman walking. The problem is not so much whether she should stay or not. The problem is that we've got no idea about the Brexit objectives in the negotiations. This political uncertainty is a reflection of the underlying party political uncertainty. However, what we can assert is that the removal of the working majority for the Conservative Party means that Theresa May's emphasis on we're going to have a hard exit is giving way to the idea that, hey, Theresa, do listen, even if it's only to your own party, that not everybody wants to go nose to nose with a ding-dong battle with the European Union. We would actually like a gentle conversation in which there is a continued relationship, certainly in a single market, customs union, and yes, be ready to accept in the United Kingdom immigrants from Europe and indeed elsewhere. The UK economy is not looking good at all. The pound has become very weak, and the increase in wages are now lower than inflation, which means that there will be a continuing drop in the standard of living throughout this Brexit process. It's not just because of the election that that's happening, but there are real economic problems with Brexit, particularly in the absence of a clear plan to go it alone in some way. I, for one, probably along with most Brits who live on the continent, either in the EU or in Switzerland, can only be glad that there is growing pressure now, not least from former prime ministers in the United Kingdom, to soften the approach in moving toward Brexit. That would only be a good thing, and it is if you like, the only bit of joy I can get out of the current set of news. The political situation in the United States is also very unknown, because we now have indications from the Washington Post, which is a paper that tends to get things right, is now saying that Robert Mueller, they always say Mueller, of course, is going to look at Trump's own role in the alleged interference of the Russians in the election process, and this is worse, the alleged cover-up or interference with the process of trying to understand what went on. His firing of James Comey was wrong morally, wrong politically, and wrong even for himself, and it's leading to quite a number of revelations, as well as this move by Mueller to expand his investigation into the role of the president himself, as well as the actions of the Russians in the process of getting Trump elected. For the moment, stock markets are certainly staying rather high. I think they took a bit of a setback when the Washington Post first announced that Mueller was expanding his investigation. But people are hanging in there. I mean, there are enough people supporting Trump and enough businesses thinking, yeah, well, maybe he will reduce taxation and maybe he will reduce the burden on companies and that we can do a little bit better with fewer regulations. But I'm getting more and more skeptical. I think the man, Trump, is actually producing an awful lot of words, but very little action. It's really hard to see anything concrete that he's done to improve the economy. And all the problems of the economy, including overcapacity and an unwillingness to recognize that you'd be far better off trying to solve issues in retailing than issues in coal mining, is so off the mark. À côté de la plaque, they say in French. He's just not there in tackling the serious problems of the United States economy. Now, Janet Yellen has increased the Fed rate, the overnight rate, to a little under 1%. In fact, as I speak, it's 0.91%. And it's a step towards normalization. What does normalization mean in Yellen talk and also in Roy's talk? Come to that, because my concept of normalization is that inflation is positive. It should be around 2%, and that you can earn, even in the short term, a little bit more than the 2%. Let's say 2.5% if you put money into a current bank account, and that then you would earn a bit more as the years in which you deposit go up, maybe to 3, 4, maybe 5% at 10 years and beyond. And we're a long way from that. And as Yellen tries to move towards that, she's all the time taking a risk that the cost of debt to enterprises and to households will slow the economy down. So we've got that problem, the economic problem, and then we've got the political problem that the Trump presidency may not last, that the man himself has such a character that he declares war on just about everybody, including his own people, and that really is a situation which can't continue. Let's get back to normal, where there is opposition, where there is discussion, and not just diktat, making Putin look quite democratic. My goodness. Oil has gone down in price again, and it certainly does look as though the days of OPEC power have been severely curtailed, and I can only welcome that. But what I do notice is that some of the countries like Canada and the USA itself that are discovering new sources of oil, yes, we can debate whether it's a good thing to have those new sources in ecological terms, but those new sources are coming online just as the demand for oil is actually, I think, is going down, or it's not increasing the way it used to. And so the cheapness of crude oil is going to be around for a significant amount of time to come. And that's quite agreeable when you have to put the petrol in your tank or pay for your oil heating bill, or indeed your gas heating bill, because the gas price can't be too independent of the oil price. There is, of course, also now turmoil in the Middle East amongst the Arab states and Iran, and I can't help wonder that it would be far less turmoil if they had plenty of money to count on as they sell their oil from Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. Now their belts are being tightened, and when that happens, people like to blame others, and I think that is probably what's happening with the case for Qatar, which I learned apparently is pronounced Qatar in Arabic from an Arabic speaker, but I think we'll continue to say Qatar. To complete today's broadcast, I'd like to raise a subject which is neither political nor really economic. It's something that the Americans call health tourism or medical tourism. Because medical costs in the USA are very high, I might say in principle the quality of their work is very high, and it does attract very rich people to go to the USA and have treatment. And according to the video I've just watched, Even Canadians will sometimes cross the border because they can get treated more quickly in the USA than they can in their own country. However, those are relatively small numbers, in the order of hundreds of thousands, whereas we're talking about several million folk now who travel abroad from the USA to have medical treatment in a given year. And the business apparently is worth a hefty $60 billion, with each patient going abroad and spending between $5,000 and $6,000, including the airfare. Now, some of it might not involve an airfare because it could be just across the border in Mexico, but some of the figures I saw on the cost of treatment are rather striking. They could go to the American island of Costa Rica and find that costs are about half of what they are in the USA, or they could travel further, and if they went to India or Malaysia, they'd be talking about costs being about a quarter. But a lot depends on the case you are dealing with, because heart bypasses, apparently, the difference is enormous. We're talking about a number of $123,000 in the USA for a heart bypass operation versus something like $8,000 in India. Okay, well, not everybody might want to trust Indian doctors. I would personally. I once was treated in there, and they're very competent. But there we are. There is a means of saving money if you're American to go abroad. I don't know, however, whether that is covered by insurance. If they do have insurance, it certainly would not be covered if we live in Switzerland, where we are only supposed to call upon foreign interventions for our health if there is an emergency while we are abroad. We are not supposed to go abroad to save money. So there we are, listeners. Lots to think about, mostly negative this week. And I would really like there to be sort of positive news to report upon next week. I am travelling to the UK next week to meet my students in Ambleside in the Lake District, and maybe that will cheer me up a bit, then I can give you a more cheerful report after that trip to Ambleside. Speak to you again.